The Brussels correspondent for France 24, France 24, and I'm going to be guiding us through this discussion, which I think is going to touch upon a lot of the elements we've already heard today. In particular, we heard in Commission President von der Leyen's opening speech that the Commission is really focused on two areas of great transformation, and that's going to be in the energy field and in the digital field. But both of those fields are going to impact people's lives in really significant ways, and they're really going to impact people's work. Digital is going to change the way that people work, the type of jobs that exist or don't exist, and also who has a leg up, who has the best training in this kind of new atmosphere we're looking at. At the same time, the energy transition is going to involve big changes, particularly for people who are involved in very traditional sectors of the economy, and obviously for people working in the coal sector. That has been the big focus of the Just Transition Fund that we've already heard mentioned several times today, bringing people along in this transition, making sure the change is fair and just for all. So I'd like to welcome now our panelists for this discussion. First, welcome to the stage Commissioner Nicolas Schmit. He is European Commissioner for Jobs and Social Rights. Welcome, Commissioner Schmit. And then we have our panelists, Alain Dehaze, CEO of the Adecco Group, which is the world's second largest human resources provider and temporary staffing firm. Peter Claver, member of the executive board of BDA, the Confederation of German Employers Associations, and Per Hilmersson, Deputy General Secretary of ETUC, the European Trade Union Confederation. So thank you, gentlemen, all for being here today.
Get him in between. No,
Okay,
get
good.
him
Great.
Yeah, if you want to go down
sure.
there.
Great.
Okay. So, Commissioner Schmit, I want to start with you to kind of give us some scene-setting remarks. Now, as I mentioned, the Commission, and as President von der Leyen mentioned, the Commission is envisioning these big changes, but there's apprehension because we learned from the experience with the Yellow Vest movement, which has also been referenced several times today, that sometimes there can be a social backlash if people feel that the burdens of these transitions are not being equitably distributed. So you're in charge of jobs and social rights. Can you tell us in a few words what the European Commission's vision is for how this transition should be managed, and in particular, how the EU can meet the evolving skill needs of this transition?
So, hello, great pleasure to be here and to have the opportunity to discuss with you. Well, I would start by saying that it's not the Commission who has chosen these transitions or these transformations. These transitions, they are there. The challenges are there. We have a big problem, which is a planetary problem, which is in a way a problem for, well, let's be bold, for the survival of mankind, which is the climate change. That's one big challenge we have to respond to. And the other one is the technological revolution or technological transformation we are just into. So these two challenges, either we say we cannot do something about it and they will happen anyway, and this will have consequences, nobody knows exactly which one, but probably disastrous ones. Or we say, okay, these are two challenges, but in these challenges we can have huge opportunities. But this means that we have to shape them. We have to find the right ways to manage these transformations. This is true for the green transition, for the climate issue, but it is also true for the technological transformation. Both give us a lot of opportunities. Now, we know that there is anxiety everywhere. People very often do not like change, and especially if they do not know exactly what change means for their lives. And so we have to build up policies which respond to the challenges of these transitions or transformations, taking into account the aspirations of people. And I think this is absolutely part of these policies of transitions, to give them not only an economic background, an economic content, but also make sure that they are fair, as you said, fair and just, which means that they correspond to the social values, by the way, also maybe democratic values, but the social values we are very much committed to in Europe. And this is the integration of what we call the pillar of social rights into these policies of transitions, into the way how we will manage these transitions. The formula, nobody should be left behind, giving people the tools to adapt to these transitions. We know that things will not stay as they were in the past, but we have to convince people, we have to change also the mindset of people that they have to adapt to these changes, and we give them the possibilities to adapt. And here skills are a key issue, a key player in this adaptation and this adjustment. But skills is also something abstract. We have to show that in the companies, at all the levels, we provide people with the right skills. We are ready to invest into people. I think the big challenge is not only investing in new technologies, developing new technologies, but the big challenge is how can we make sure that people are ready for these technologies, that people accept the green transition, that they finally at the end notice that the green transition has also a lot of positive sides. If the air is better, if the mobility becomes better, and all these kinds of the environment becomes better, this is a win-win for everybody. But this is a process we have to work on. This is a political process. This is an investment challenge because we have to invest a lot in also the social background of these transitions. If we do that, we get the support. If we do not do that, the consequences might be a vast movement of yellow vest, as we have already experienced in France.
And as you say, these aren't challenges that the Commission has invented. These things are changing, whether the Commission identifies them as priorities or not. Let's get the reaction of the panelists. What do you guys think about Commissioner Schmit and the Commission in general, the areas that they've prioritized for this transition? Are they prioritizing the main areas? Is the Commission really identifying what the main challenges will be? Let's start with Alain.
Yes. Also, good afternoon, and thank you for being part of our panel. Happy to be here. I would say, elaborating of what Commissioner Schmit has said, technology is a huge opportunity, but I'm cautiously optimistic. Because the challenge, as Commissioner was saying, is how do you transition, especially the people, from the current situation to this new technology, the new skills needed, and so on. Knowing that today, people are losing around 40% of their skills every 3 years. So basically, everybody is becoming obsolete after a period of 10 years. And this is the real time bomb, the real social time bomb. If people don't get the opportunity, the feasibility to reskill and upskill themselves. So that's why, in a very concrete way, we promote 3 kinds of recipes to get along with this challenge. The first one is to consider the spend companies are doing in reskilling and upskilling as real investment in human capital. Yeah. Today, the spend doing in human capital is considered as a cost. And I think as a first political sign, not only political but also financial sign, would be to change the way companies and business is allowed to treat this investment in reskilling and upskilling and allow them to amortize this investment in human capital, making a big change in the mindset, but also on the financial side, allowing them to really invest. The second, we promote what already some countries have done, Singapore, France, in the meantime, Brazil with a kind of voucher, it is what we call the individual portable training account. Because we know that going forward, you will need a kind of new pillar in the social protection system. Not only about illness, not only about retirement, you will need also to protect yourselves regarding this development of technology and how you reskill and upskill yourself. How do you have the possibility to reskill yourself in a lifelong learning process? And so that's why, as a measure, especially for government, because at this stage it's decided by the government, is to install this individual portable training account. And the third proposal we are doing is also to government to treat in a differentiated way the layoff cost from the reskilling and upskilling cost. Why? Just to give also a financial incentive to the business, not only to lay off people because they are redundant in terms of skills, and then rehire other people with other skills. And it is quite incredible, the last years, how many press releases you see with the first paragraph, we are laying off thousands of people, second paragraph, and we are hiring so many new people with that skills. This is a new phenomenon. I think 5 years ago, it was not the case. If we want to avoid that kind of situation, which is quite disruptive, which is financially very impacting, let's motivate the business to say, hey, before you lay off and you rehire, invest in reskilling and upskilling people in the new skills and capabilities. It will be less disruptive, and it will be also financially really attractive. Just to give you some figures, ABB has done the math. If you lay off and you rehire somebody, it is about 1,000 Swiss francs or US dollar, almost same parity today. If you reskill somebody, it will be 30 to 35,000 Swiss francs, US dollar, and so on. So you see, it's 60% cheaper to upskill and or reskill somebody rather than laying off and rehire. So this is in a nutshell the three proposal, really right amortization of the reskilling and upskilling cost, individual portable training account, and finally differentiated tax treatment between layoff cost and upskilling, reskilling.
Let's turn to Peter Claver next from the employer's perspective. Do you think the Commission is prioritizing the right things?
Yes, I fully agree to the analysis of Commissioner Schmit, and I also back your position, but with one exception. It's not new that education is seen as investment. If I look to German economy, I give you the figure. Initial vocational training is an investment of 27 billion euros, and this is only initial vocational training. And then we have another 33 billion per year invested in further training. So my main point is, of course, we have to disseminate this mindset on employer side, not to see education as something which has to be organized by the state. They should do it by themselves and should see it as an investment. So fully agree. And I would say to you, employers' representatives have to be involved. So we don't do it alone from our side as employers, but if you look to the curricula, we develop them together with trade union representatives. And there are some ideologists, I want to get rid of them, but mostly we have a huge deal of pragmatism on an employee side. And with those, we really can develop what is needed in the companies. And I want to get politicians out of the process, of the decision-making process. And this is where we could really bring a new role or a strengthened role of the social partners into the game. I think it's working quite well in Germany, but it should be disseminated, not as a German model, but the principle that employers and employees representatives should develop themselves the needed skills. This would avoid what is one of the biggest problems. This is the mismatch of skills.
Yeah.
I often hear, look, is very, very well skilled, but is unemployed. And I said, oh, for what very well skilled? Is it just a university degree where is no need in the market, or you don't find your niche for your special degree? Then it's not a very well educated person. He needs further training or a re-education. So, and if employers and workers' representatives do it by themselves, I think we can avoid big mismatches in the field of skills.
Per Hilmersson, this is an interesting point about taking the idea of education away from being thought of as just a state-run thing and something that companies can get involved in. So, Per, what are your reactions to what the Commission is prioritizing? And maybe you could also react to Peter's point there about how the unions and the employers can work together on this.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation. Well, first and foremost, when it comes to the bigger picture and the consequences we now see from the economic crisis that is over in a way, but we still feel the scars from European workers. Because even if the EU economy is growing in a very positive way, there is still a lot of social inequalities, still gender employment gap, gender pay gap, youth unemployment, a lot of precarious work created. And this, of course, and by the way, our members, the workers, are less paid now than they were before the crisis. One in 10 workers is at risk of poverty. And all this, of course, creates a disillusionment and anger and frustration. And fingers are pointed not only on mainstream politicians and Brussels, but also, unfortunately, migrants. And it feeds populist, anti-European, nationalistic and far-right forces. So this is not only a challenge for the labor market, it's a challenge for our democratic societies and the European Union as such. So this is a big challenge faced for workers. Also, of course, now climate change, well now, it's been going on for a long time, but climate change and digitalization is other big challenges. And we are not against the measures that needs to be taken, but we need to have the security in that change. And I'm not talking about securing the jobs, it's about securing the employability of people. And skills is one very important dimension of this. I have read some studies suggesting that half of today's work activities could be automated by 2055. And also the demographic challenge by having 3 workers for 1 pensioner today. In 2050 there will be 2 workers for each pensioner. So there's also those dimensions to take into account. And I think workers are worried about this. They feel concerned about the future. And I think it's a lack of social Europe that makes them even more concerned and lack trust in the future. So we need more social Europe, basically. And it also makes economic sense. Without a social Europe, there can't be a competitive Europe. Just look at the economically successful countries like the Nordics, Germany, Netherlands, Austria, Luxembourg. I mean, they didn't become economically successful and then started redistributing the wealth and through social policies. They built an economic strength in parallel with creation of social policies and collective bargaining systems. So this shows that there is the social policies and economic progress is mutually supported. And here I think the Commission is totally on the right track. Actually, I can sense there's a change in narrative from the Commission and the analysis as well, starting already from the previous Commission by Jean-Claude Juncker, with, of course, the European Pillar of Social Rights as the main flagship and the proof of this new insight, basically, of the EU Commission. And I'm really happy to see that Commissioner Schmit is taking over this and carrying it forward with the Social Europe communication and upcoming initiatives. So, but of course, the EU role is fairly limited because of the treaties, because of the financing of the budget. There's not much money. So for us, it's of course important that the EU can produce guidelines and policies, co-financing. But for us as trade union, it is very important with collective bargaining and social dialogue together with employers. And I'm very happy to hear that employers see investment in training as an investment. I've read studies conducted by recruitment agencies showing that training employees costs approximately 3 times less than recruiting new staff. So it makes an economic sense. So full support of what the Commission is planning and full support of what the employers are saying as well.
Well, Commissioner Schmit, this must be encouraging for you, but at the same time, you guys are identifying, I think, some pretty significant changes to the way that employers interact with employees when we're talking about this training up. As you say, it's not entirely new, Peter. There has been education for some time, but there's going to be this increasing focus. Commissioner Schmit, my question for you would be, how can the EU work with employers and employees' organizations to allow them to make those changes that are being envisioned here?
Well, first I must say, listening to let's say the more employers' representatives, I can fully agree, because I share absolutely your three topics, your 3 priorities, and I think we can enhance and work on them. We cannot impose them because we do not have all the competences to do so, but we can create in Europe a climate which goes into that direction. About investment, I fully share that, and you will, hopefully, because we are still in discussion there, find in our agenda, skills agenda, the idea that we have to consider skills as a real investment. And it has to be treated like that in the sense of taxation, for instance, but also perhaps if we look at it in the longer run in terms of accounting, because it is an investment. Human capital is also a form of capital. Unfortunately, it does not reflect, this is not reflected in the way how we evaluate it. And I fully agree also, which has been, and by the way, the personal account, we will propose that as one of the instruments, as one of the tools. Now, it can perhaps not be used in the same way in Germany and in France or in Singapore, but I think the idea that everybody should have a right to be skilled and reskilled and upskilled, that lifelong learning is an opportunity and not a constraint. It's not a way how you get rid of people, but how you can keep them in the labor market, in the job. That certainly we have labor markets which are characterized by more mobility, but mobility is not negative as such. It can be positive even for people if people associate to mobility also some level of security. If I do not know what happens to me if I lose my job and I just drop into some kind of black hole, well, I will be very reluctant for change. If I know that there is a system, and you described this system, investing in people, trying to accompany them in the personal transitions, well, we create a different kind of approach where finally there is no classical sense of unemployment, but there is a transition in my professional life. And I know that I have a revenue, I have an income, but I get also new opportunities, either in my company or eventually in another company. I tried to initiate this in a previous life, which I called skills bridge. So a bridge from one job to another through skills. Now, I agree also with the high responsibility of employers and that lifelong learning, vocational training should be mainly be an issue between social partners. I believe very much in collective bargaining. I visited, I remember, in a big country, some big companies, when I met the employers and the trade representatives, and we talked about training and training the young and giving opportunities to young. All that was part of collective bargaining, by the way. It's not only Germany, by the way. The Nordic countries work a bit in that same spirit. So we have to develop this. We have to enhance this. Not because it's a good German model or Nordic model, but it's a model which works, which has proven to be efficient. So here the Commission has a role to play. Good practices, enhancing it through some financial supports. We have ESF Plus. I hope that after the negotiation of the budget of the multi-annual financial framework, we will keep some money to enhance and promote these policies. I think this is something where Europe can be a model, because we believe that Europe has a specific model, that we can not only master these transitions in a positive way, but in the interest also of a stronger economic Europe. Because we have to, we are in a competition with China, with a very special model nobody among us likes and would like to have, with the US, where we know also that there are a lot of weaknesses in this model. And I think we have the opportunity together in this context of social dialogue, in this context of shared responsibilities, to build a stronger model and accept that we have to promote change and organize and shape change. So all these ideas which have been put forward, I think, are part of our approach, of the Commission's approach, and we have to discuss with social partners. Very important. We have to listen to what social partners tell us, and we have to work with member states to push them into these directions in order to make our economy better in a social term, but also in a competitiveness term. That means productivity comes from where? Not only from technology. Productivity comes from better trained people. These people are making productivity above all, because if you have the best machines and people are not trained for the machines, well, the machines by their own will not be able. So it's a question of a whole organization, and that's what we have to work on.
Now you say that everyone should have a right to upskilling, but I guess the question becomes, who's going to pay for that?
Yeah.
Peter, I mean, you say
Yeah,
the employers can take that
you
on.
gave me now I wanted to step in to provoke you, Commissioner, a bit, because you spoke about the right. You see, and you spoke about protection. I would prefer to say enable people and give them the duty to do it, because it's not a gift we have to give to the workers. They have to enable themselves. Of course, we will give assistance, we will pay for it, but I would really advise you not to speak about protection and about rights. If we look to the risks which are mostly affected, to the group which are mostly affected by risk, it's the low-skilled workforce. And they have the lowest rate in upskilling. They are offered and offered and offered, but there is a lack of motivation. Please don't tell those people you have a right. Tell them it's in your interest to do it. You see, and I don't want to be not sensible, because there are many reasons why they don't step in and why they are hesitating and why they feel it is a challenge for them. They are afraid of. But I think we have to put a bit pressure, better to say to invite them, but in a clear and decisive way. If you don't follow the invitation, there is no protection for you.
Alain, do you think people have a right to upskilling?
Yeah, a few thought on what has been said. First, fully agree that the curriculum of both the vocational training but also the upskilling, the reskilling, should be even, I would say, business driven. Because companies know what they are facing, what kind of talent they need and so on. So, and then you have a social dialogue and you have a platform with the education system to align the curriculum and so on. So I fully support that. Now, regarding who is paying what and who is defining, personally, according to the experience we see, I think it's a kind of tripartite, let's say, solution. I don't speak about the financials, I'm coming to that. But I think that it is the responsibility of the individual to feel responsible for his or her employability along the life. It is also, and we see from the business, to say, okay, I need the right talent to stay competitive in this market, because if I don't have the right talent, I'm losing my competitiveness, and I will have another competitors taking my market share and so on, and there is the sustainability issue. But I think it's also responsibility of the state, and you are in charge of Europe. If we want a strong Europe, if we want strong countries, strong industries and strong companies, we need the best talent. And so at the end, the three parties should really make a kind of agreement that for the sake of the success, upskilling and reskilling should be embedded both at individual level, and why not with a financial participation like you have for illness or for retirement and so on. You as individual, you contribute to that. Especially if you have your individual portable account, you can contribute to that in your account. It is also a responsibility of the business to make sure they keep the talent and also contribute financially to that. But I think it's also the responsibility of the government and the European Union to have the right framework to be put in place to make it possible.
So some shared responsibility there.
It's a shared responsibility.
Would you agree that the individual has some responsibility to ensure his or her own employability?
Good question.
We made studies, and I can tell you in the northern part of Europe, people are considering upskilling, reskilling, and so on, lifelong learning, as really a primary personal responsibility. And the more you go to the south, the more it will be the nation, the state responsibility.
Yeah, I think it also depends on the education level of the individual worker. High skilled, high educated worker has in his or her, not DNA, but it's in their framework that they should constantly upskill themselves. But I'm a bit worried when it comes to individual, the focus on the individual, because, and you said it as well, there's a need for assistance as well. So we need to provide that. And I don't have any problem with calling it enabling people instead of having the right or protection, as long as you pay for it, and you said you would, and giving the assistance. And actually, it doesn't have to be the employers assisting. I know in UK, for instance, they have introduced something called, or they've had it for 20 years, I think, something called learning reps, learning representatives who are funded by the state to give the assistance to individual workers, but also that it should be during working hours, so we don't need it. We don't do it in evening courses.
First problem between the two of us,
right?
That it's just during working hours. I think there can be a lot being done at the weekend. So I would not exclude working hours, but if we want to teach them, let's say, in English language, it's not just the company who has the added value, it's the person who gets the added value. So I would like to see more time investment, not money, but time investment by workforce as well. So if you would not exclude this, I would come closer to you.
Right. And I mean, and this should be ideally solved by collective bargaining in collective agreements, where we both agree on on the outset and on the framework, but also help each other identifying the skills needed. And there, the employers, of course, are very important because you know what your company needs in the future.
Commissioner Schmit, what do you make of these ideas?
Well, I have no problem with enabling, but I think you can have a right and be pushed to use it. Because if you have a right and you don't use it, you have a problem. So I think it should be a right for each citizen even. Singapore, they have introduced now this kind of voucher. Every citizen gets to skill or to educate or to further educate him or herself. So I think it should be a right, but it should be a right you should be invited to take and to use. So nobody can use it in the same way. And therefore, we need some guidance also for people. We speak a lot about the least qualified. The least skilled are those we skill the least, which is, in a way, it's the best skilled, we invest most on them. So we have really to make a big effort on the least skilled, on the least qualified. This is not an easy task, but when we look at the labor market, this is a necessity because those jobs who might be under stress also because of digitalization very often are in this category of skills level. So I think certainly enable, certainly invite, I can agree with that, and but also guide, because you cannot just say, well, employability, that's your business, and come back when you have become employable. This is too complex. Nobody would do that. So there is a big responsibility of companies. There is absolutely a big responsibility of the state, because if we are not doing that, if we are not investing or supporting companies in investing, what happens? Well, people will lose their jobs, will not be employable. We have to provide social benefits, unemployment benefits, and we have a problem in our economy because already now we have a lack of skilled people. We have unemployment on one side and a lack of qualified people on the other side. So this mismatch is growing, it's not reducing. So that's the big challenge, to reduce this mismatch, and we can only do it by investing in the right skills. Right skills means that we know more or less what kind of skills people need. And that's not somewhere on the on the 10th floor of the Berlaymont where the commissioner says, well, this is the skill everybody should have. No, this has to be done at the level of the companies. This has to be done in a social partnership where people discuss and see how can we manage because some people will lose their job, or we can upskill people if we manage that. So social dialogue plays a very important role here. But we have to motivate, we have to take along member states on this path. Some are very much ahead, some are very much aware, others less. Same thing for companies. Many companies have understood that they have to undergo this kind of approach and that skills is essential for their future survival. Others do not know exactly, because what happens to the individual sometimes happens to companies. They do not know how to approach this skilling necessity. So I think we have to put into place a shared responsibility, social partners, certainly the individual. The mindset of people is key, because if people consider that skilling is not important for them, you cannot force to be skilled. You cannot force them to be skilled. So we have to work on the mindset. This is the right and how they use their right. And if they do not use it, then there is a problem. And this is some kind also of education, and that's also part of the social partners who have to do that. The unions have to be convincing. Therefore, it's so important to have the unions on board, because if the unions are not on board and say, no, this is not the right thing, well, people will say, what kind of intentions do you have? So I think there is a change in our way how we manage the economy, because the business models are changing a lot through technology, and the jobs are changing very rapidly. So I support this, and we at the European level try to foster this discussion, to encourage member states to invest more, to discuss with, as we do it now here, with social partners to work on a new kind of model based on the new technologies and skills. And I think this can be a success.
A shared responsibility there. Let's let the audience exercise their right to ask a question. I think we have time for 2 questions before we wrap up. Does anybody have a question for our panel on skills? Yep, right here, conveniently next to the microphone.
I'm not sure I have the right to speak. I was previously the General Secretary of the European Trade Union Confederation, but I'm retired, so maybe I'm not sure. I have a right to speak. I have made a lot of notes, and I agree with a lot of things that have been said. But I have a problem with the question of skills. Who can decide what is the right skill? If you have a group of 50, 100 young people of aged 17, 18, who are we to tell them you have to be an engineer if they want to be a comedian or study literature or do something else? And also, do you know really what sort of skills will be needed in 10 years' time? So this question of sort of guiding, if not pushing people towards acquiring very specific type of skills is for me a question mark.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think one for Alain, then let's go to Peter. But I mean, who are we to decide that people should have to train themselves for the jobs that are available? Alain first, and then Peter.
I can start. I think there are 2 questions in your questions. The first question is the identification of the skills needed. And I think that there is a clear view that we should listen to what the companies are looking for, because they know exactly what they need, what is the scarcity, what kind of competence they need to be successful. And so you need a process. There is an excellent process in the vocational education system in Germany, in Austria, and in Switzerland, and so on, where both employers, education, and trade unions are identifying these skills, and then they develop the curriculum. Perfect. I think it's really great. That's why in these countries you have the lowest youth unemployment in the world.
And
in these
Peter?
3 countries.
And Peter?
I think we have to divide between the school system and the vocational training system. I think there is no school system at all which really directs the pupil to special professions. No. This would be a bad school system. I think this is a later stage where people have to decide which direction do I want to go. Do I want to be an artist or an engineer or a nurse or whatever? So I think this freedom is freedom of everybody, and the system never will force someone. But if we then talking about skills which are needed on the labor market, then we have to have a look into the companies to see what is needed there.
I suppose it's also a question of tailoring to the student's interest, to the student's skills, and then that continues into their working life. I'm afraid we do have to wrap it up there because we're out of time. Certainly a lot of issues to discuss here. I want to thank our panelists for a very interesting conversation. How about a round of applause for them? Yep. And now you guys can go ahead and leave the stage. We're going to turn it over to Jackie, and I think we're going to do a little roundup. You guys will be able to hear what was said downstairs. Jackie?
Thank you very much indeed, Dave.